Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be
Okay,
here.
great, great. Actually, a pleasure is on my side. Before we will start, would you mind to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. So my name is Christian Johansen. I'm a developer in Oslo, Norway, and
Mhm.
I've been doing Clojure for um, 10 plus years now.
Yeah.
And yeah, full time for most of that time. And I do Clojure full time at work, and I do have some Clojure open source projects going on.
Okay, okay. In your work, what are you building in Clojure and ClojureScript?
I work for the Norwegian Food Safety Authority. So
Hmm.
we're making, right now, we're working on systems for the um, employed inspectors to use in their work, like internal tooling. So
Okay,
it's for case processing and yeah, for doing their work basically. It's their work tool that we make.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. And is
So
it
it's
pure Clojure and ClojureScript?
Yes, our the part that we're building is Clojure and ClojureScript and Datomic, and that's for everything.
And
Yeah.
DataMake, okay, okay. I just
Yes.
wanted to ask you if you would be willing to tell more what the dev stack is, what libraries do you use?
Yeah, sure. So we're using Datomic, as I said, which I
Hmm.
would say is an integral part of our design.
Hmm.
And then we have Clojure, ClojureScript libraries. We're like this normal stuff like Ring. Um,
Yeah.
we're pretty light on libraries and frameworks,
Yeah.
so it's mostly
What
like
about
utility stuff. So
yeah? What about schema checking? Do you use like Clojure spec or Mali?
we use a little bit of ClojureSpec, but not really a lot. We're not
Okay.
using Mali at all, so we haven't really gone full on with that stuff. So we have
Okay.
some spec checking at our boundaries, and
Yeah.
then but not a lot. I think probably less than
Okay.
most Clojure projects. Yeah.
Okay. So I expect that the code base is very dynamic, and you use all the advantages of Clojure being a dynamic language, right?
Yeah, to a certain degree, but I mean, we take great care of like shoring up our the edges of the system so
Hmm.
that things are predictable
Yeah.
further
Yeah.
in, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yes, this is what most people, at least based by my experience, this is what people use Malay spec or previous prismatic schema
Yeah.
for. So what mechanisms do you use to ensure that these, let's say, boundaries are correct? Is it with tests or
Yeah.
asserts?
I would say tests and basically the architecture of the app. Um, so we've designed the app to be it uses a CQRS, command query
Yeah,
responsibility separation
response
segregation. Yeah.
segregation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very basically we have one entry point in our app for commands if you want to
Mhm.
do stuff, and there's one entry point for queries if you want to know stuff. And
Yeah.
so that means that we can do a lot in those two places to protect the
Mhm.
entire core of our system.
Okay. Okay.
And
So you
then
always get a message into some queue and you have some processing. So there is some form of dispatch.
yes,
Let's say which function or which business logic is responsible for that. And the
yes,
same goes for queries where you have a router and knows who to ask. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
very basically.
And okay. And you have like strictly split the code between Clojure and ClojureScript, or do you reuse any code between backend and frontend?
There's not a strict split. We have very few CLJS files,
Yeah.
and then we have a bunch of CLJC files and a bunch of CLJ files, basically. Most of our front end code is used by both the front end and the back end. So we can, like all the UI stuff or all the rendering stuff is available for both the front end and the back end because some stuff
Yeah.
is rendered on the server and some stuff is rendered on the client.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and by default, do you attempt to render our backend or front end?
I would say it depends on the kind of screen you're on. If it's a relatively static screen, it will be rendered on the server, and if
Yeah.
it's a dynamic screen, it will be rendered on the client. So we have, like, since this is a working tool, it has quite different kinds of pages. Like we have some pages that are like statistics and insight, which are mainly displaying data, and then we have other like working areas where there is lots of forms and lots of interaction with the user. So yeah, we treat those a little bit differently. But having said that, this system is like we've just been at it for a year, and we're migrating things out of an older system. So our system is like really in the beginning stages still.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And the older system is not in Clojure, or is it?
No, it's an old Java application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not just our system. It's like an old huge monolith that does everything that the Food Safety Authority does. And our team is just responsible for one piece of that. So we're kind of extracting our domain into a separate application.
And you said that you have been in for a year, but there is a monolith that has been used for a while, and you are expected to cut out pieces. You use DataMake. I suppose the older system was using some SQL database. So it will be, or it has been, a big bang, let's say, switch from one system when you exported data from one system into the second one, or are those systems running in parallel?
Yeah, we're trying to avoid the big bang.
Yeah.
So right now they're running in parallel, and it's still the old application that owns the data. And we now we import the data daily now, and we iterate on the import stuff. And then we're hoping to make the final import sometime next year.
Okay.
That's the plan. So, and in the meantime, we will like roll out individual features bit by bit. Yeah.
So you have data integration. So when you store data, you store them also to the SQL database, and then you have ETL pipeline that will take the data from SQL, migrate it to DataMake, and then you read them from DataMake.
It's actually it's less sophisticated than that. It's currently we are in read-only mode in our app, or that's not entirely correct. But we have some workflows that we have a separate database that we can write to. But for the main data, we're in read-only mode. So basically, we take all the data that's ours, and we put it on a NATS queue, and then we import it into an empty DataMake database. And then just every day we just blow everything out and do it over again.
Okay.
For now. And then
For now, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you compare the code base in Clojure and Java, how is the? I know Clojure is significantly more expressive. I don't have to ask, but how would you compare, for example, the architecture and the development approach to when you build application in Clojure in comparison with a similar, or let's say previous generation of the same thing in Java?
It's difficult for me to answer because first of all, I didn't make the old system, and I haven't really done a lot of work in Java. So I'm not really sure how to answer that question. I think like we have we write more code ourselves, is my impression, that if you compare to other like more standard teams like using Spring or stuff like that. We don't have a lot of frameworks. There are not a lot of unnecessary abstractions. So the code is quite direct, I would say. And it's predominantly functional, right? Most of our stuff is just functions.
Yes, I think one thing, it might be a case, it might not, but what I saw in the land, let's say, of Java and those languages, people are very often quite happy with using MVC pattern for everything, every single time. So no matter what system they build, they will end up with some layer that describes the database. They will end up with a layer that describes the services that exist in the system. They will end up with controllers. They will end up with templates. There might be some entities going between the model and view layer, and all applications looks alike.
Yeah.
While in the land of functional programming, I often see that people want to express problems more like mathematical problems. And they are trying to find DSLs, algebras, mechanisms, how to say this problem is actually very much like this other thing I saw elsewhere, and I want to express it in this way. And if I do this, the whole application will be just, let's say, threading macro, a series of transformations.
Yeah.
And this is very common, not only in Clojure. Actually, in Haskell, it seems to me that it's quite normal for people in Haskell to create a library, not because there isn't a library. There is a library, but they want to express the problem differently by using different concepts. And so what concepts do you express when you are building this system?
That's a good question. So it's oriented a lot around our domain, I would say. Like you mentioned, the MVC pattern. Like there are no models. We have a lot of entities, right? So I think using Datomic has a big footprint in our code base, because the data that we put in Datomic is the data that our application is dealing with. And so we use, and it's led to us using namespace keywords for almost everything, and they have global meaning in the application. So that, meaning if we have like a person/name, if we have a person/name in the UI, it's called person/name, and we have like all the usual assumptions about that property holds. So I would say that the domain concepts, as expressed with entities and namespace keys, are very visible across the entire code base.
Yes. So basically, there is no mapping layer between the database and the UI, and yes,
well,
which saves a
almost
lot of time.
like there's very little mapping, I would say, but we do have some denormalization before we go to the UI. Basically, we want to, how should I say it? Bake the data a little bit on the back end so that it's made for rendering, if you will.
Yes.
So, and that means that we have some keys that you will only find in UI code that are denormalized or aggregates or whatever. But every piece of data that doesn't need to go through that process will just have the same name in the UI. And there's no mapping if there's no reason for a mapping.
Yes. Yeah, this was supposed to be my next question, whether the API is based on the needs of frontend, which now it looks like it is, right?
Yes.
That you are building backends for frontends. And so when you got a chance to work on this, the decision to do Clojure was already done, or were you one of the people who helped decide whether to use Clojure or not?
No, it was our decision, and it was a part of why we were hired. So this is a new team working in this area, and the way that our IT organization is organized is that you have autonomous teams, like properly autonomous teams, that can choose to make their own technology choices. And so I was hired together with one colleague of mine, and we basically said that if we're going to come here, we'll build this in Clojure. Will this be okay? And then they said, yes, every team makes their own choices. And we said, fine, and we're coming and we're building it in Clojure. So,
Great.
Yeah.
So they trust more your engineering skills.
Yes.
And that was the okay.
And
And so you decided for a ClojureScript, and Datamake.
yes.
Are you happy with this decision?
Extremely happy. Yeah. I mean, I love this stack. It's great to work with. And since we started working there, we also adopted NATS, NATS, which is a messaging system. It has a lot in common with Kafka, but it's a lot easier from an operational standpoint. And it doesn't map one-to-one. And this was a technology that they were using already in their IT organization that we have adopted
you use
as well.
it for the, like, when you send a new event for storage, it ends up.
Yeah. We have queues for importing data, and we have queues for like our commands. All the commands go in a queue. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Let's speak for a second about front-end part, about ClojureScript. Have you got a chance to work with other languages on front-end besides ClojureScript?
Yeah. So I used to do a lot of JavaScript. That was kind of where I came from. But it's been a while now since I did a lot of JavaScript.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would you compare the flow when you are a ClojureScript developer and JavaScript developer?
I mean, I think so. Obviously, having immutable data is a game changer, I think.
Yes.
And I think the main, other than that, is like the stability of the tool chain is also a big thing.
Yes. Yes,
absolutely. Because the churn in the JavaScript world is just insane.
Yeah, they are on the exactly opposite side of the spectrum of how much effort you have to put in just to stay in one place, just to be using the things that have been used at the moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, being able to work with immutable data, I think, changes your entire approach. And so that's been great for me. And I mean, after I learned about ClojureScript, I still did some JavaScript projects, and I kind of tried to adopt the ClojureScript approach to JavaScript, which I think a lot of people probably have tried. And
so, have you been using things like immutable JS? Or
and Mori.
Mori, yeah.
But you kind of run into this problem where it's not very ergonomic, right? Because it's so foreign. You opt out of all the built-in syntax of the language.
And that's one thing. And the second thing is every single library you will ever use is not going to be using immutable. So you always have to wrap every interaction with every library.
Yeah. So the last project where I did JavaScript, we didn't use any of those, but we tried to be like immutable by convention instead, which does not really work. Or, I mean, it can take you some places, but I think pretty much all the bugs we had in that project were because someone had accidentally mutated something that shouldn't have been mutated.
Okay, good. When I was building a lot of apps, it was actually that I did not test that particular version of the browser. This has definitely improved a lot. So now when I write code, I just write it in Firefox, and usually it works everywhere.
Yeah, I know. I used to spend a lot of time testing different browsers.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I did Frontend like in the early 2000s, and that was pretty much 80% of the job was to fight with Internet Explorer.
Yes. I remember table layouts before CSS layouts are viable. I started making websites on Netscape and Internet Explorer 3.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it was 4. It was so much better, but I didn't know it was breaking the standard. So I was like, that's so bad. It's not working. All of the things I have built in Internet Explorer 4 are working so well. And it didn't know that actually Microsoft is breaking the standard, not Netscape back then. But Yeah, it has improved a lot. I
Yeah.
think it has started improving with CSS resets
Yeah.
and,
I mean, yeah.
and with standardization of JavaScript.
Yeah.
So because it wasn't just debugging, it wasn't just JavaScript. The debugging was also that things were showing differently.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there were times where browsers didn't even agree that the default background color is white
No.
on page.
Yeah. It used to be gray in a lot of browsers. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So you have to even declare the background color for a body, and yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anything that you see that exists in JavaScript world, and you would love to have such a thing in ClojureScript?
Um, I'm not really up to speed on the JavaScript community, to be quite honest.
Yeah,
So I kind of fell off, and yeah. So
there is.
I don't really know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is. For example, you wrote. Is it Sasha, the component library?
I started writing it at least. Yeah.
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 and and I would say that in React, in Vue.js, in some manner, let's say there is abundance of existing component libraries,
Yeah.
but at the same time now with ChatGPT, when you say I use Tailwind or I use Material UI, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Create accordion, create menu navigation, generate this, then you used to like Hickory that will turn it into Hiccup. You actually might get components you need on demand. And
Yeah, maybe. But I think there are a lot of details that you're probably missing out on, like getting accessibility right, for instance, is a lot of
yes,
work, and I would not expect ChatGPT to do that right on first try.
no way.
No.
Yeah,
So I think there's definitely a case for like a good component framework or a component library, I guess. So
yeah,
and the idea, I mean, the Sasha thing was just originally something I created to have some examples for Portfolio, which is another tool that I make.
yes,
And then I
yes,
had this idea that it would be nice to have like a Hiccup library of components, but I have not followed up on that idea. So whatever is on GitHub is just like very meager start of
yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah. In the past, like a couple of years ago, what we did is we bought Tailwind UI Kit, which is around 500 components.
Mm.
We ran it through all through Hickory, so we ended up with 500 components
Oh,
in Hiccup
yeah.
compatible for Tailwind. So you can just go take the code and use it in your application. So this has been how we did it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, what I do is, do you know V0 from
Mm.
Verso?
No.
V0 Dev. It's so you describe the component you want. It does not. So one thing where it is really bad is when you want to build dashboards. But besides dashboards, you describe what you want and it writes React component for you. I think the URL is v0.dev. Yes. Yeah, I even pay those $20 per month for that. I use it when we are prototyping. So actually, when I am sending a description to my designer, I don't just send him a description, but I sit down with V0 and I iterate until I will get more or less the UI I want.
Mm-hmm.
So he not only gets a text description, but he also gets something that has been generated by V0.
Mm.
And besides dashboards, where it either let's say not renders half of the data or all the component it generates just break, but for page designs or let's say individual components, subparts of the dashboard, it works very well. And what I found that ChatGPT is quite good in converting JavaScript and React code to other frameworks.
Okay.
So when you give it a component, or when you give it a couple of examples, how, for example, reagent code looks like, it's decent in converting the code from JavaScript to Clojure. So having something like that for a ClojureScript might be actually great.
Yeah.
Now you go to JavaScript and then you go to ClojureScript, which is great when you build it for the first time, but when you do edits and updates, suddenly you end up doing it yourself manually.
Yeah. So I think the main reason I haven't had this problem this much is because where I work, there's a design department that make like an internal design system of components.
So all the HTML and CSS is given to you. You just have to make it into a component.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I mean, the way we render our UIs, our components are just like really stupid. It's just a hiccup. We don't we don't have components with behavior in them. We do the rendering separately from everything else. So it's just a matter of converting the HTML to hiccup, which I mean Emacs can do for me. And then putting the hiccup stuff in a function where you can pass in like the attributes you need to use.
Yes. Okay. Let's stick with ClojureScript. What led you to make DumDum?
That was a very particular problem we were trying to solve because we were using Quiescent, which is another React wrapping library for ClojureScript, like one of the early ones. And we had been using it for a while, and it was no longer being maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was using React, we had to, in order to use new versions of React, we had to update that library. And then at some point, we just figured that we're doing all this updating now, and we're not really using any of the new features because the way that Quiescent was, the big idea in Quiescent was that what if you could use React, but without local state? That was its main idea. So we weren't using most of what it was coming with React, and then we wanted to have basically something that had the same API as Quiescent, but without the React churn train, because it was causing breakage.
You have to implement React.
Yeah, and I didn't want to do that because I thought that sounded scary. So we built the same API as Quiescent on top of a smaller, simpler JavaScript library called snubdom.
Mm-hmm.
So and snubdom is like only the rendering part of React. There's no components. It's just the virtual DOM bits. So we built DumDum on top of that, and then we could swap out Quiescent with DumDum in our app by just replacing the namespace, basically, because the API was made to be exactly the same.
Exactly the same. Okay. And you have been using DumDum for a while, and you have been learning things, learning what you like, what you don't like. And later on, you came up with Replicant, which is so different that it's not DumDum number 2. It's a new library with completely different name. And what is like your thinking about front-end development and components? What has changed? What have been the main findings for you that led you to create something completely new?
So I definitely learned a lot from DumDum, and I would say it's in some ways it is DumDum too, but like you said, it's so different that it felt strange to keep using that name because you can't really. You can't really replace that. You have to work a little bit if you want to go from one to the other. And so, and with Replicant, I did write React myself, or basically that's what it is, right? It is a virtual DOM renderer that takes hiccup and keeps the DOM up to date. So I did write that algorithm eventually.
Yeah.
Yes, for Replicant.
Was it difficult?
At first, no, and then to go from 95% to 100%, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I remember when I was studying computer science, the teacher in the first year, he told us that the system is 90% of the time 90% done.
Yeah.
Yeah, those last 10% are difficult.
Yes. Yeah. So it was like originally I didn't want to do it because I thought it was going to be hard, and then I had an idea for how to do it, and then I thought, well, this is actually not too hard. So that led me to try to do it, and then I realized that, well, getting everything right is actually hard.
Yeah. And are there any concepts that, let's say, you, in comparison with DumDum, are there any concepts you abandoned, and are there any concepts you have adopted?
Yeah. So, like I said, DumDum started out to get us off of React, and over time we made it more and more data driven. Eventually, the idea was to be able to represent the entire UI as data, hiccup, right?
Hiccup, yeah.
And then at some point we gave DumDum was able to have data-driven event handlers. So instead of a function, you could say onClick and just put some data, and then you can register a global event handler that will receive those data. So basically you can have a dispatch mechanism if you want.
Yes.
And so with Replicant, the idea was to start from scratch with this idea and just make everything data, just make it completely serializable. Mm-hmm. And also one thing I learned from DumDum was that, and this came from SnubDum, the library we were wrapping, because SnubDum did not have components at all, which I originally thought was required in this model, but actually it isn't, because if you don't have state, then the component doesn't really do anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you have like a global state and component, so basically a component is just an envelope for a snippet of HTML, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you have functions to do that, right? You can just create a function that returns hiccup, and then boom. So, and the other thing, like in React and in DumDum, you had to have a component in order to have life cycle events. Like if you wanted to have a function that triggers when you're being mounted or unmounted, so on, you had to use a component. But in Replicant, as in SnubDum, you can just put lifecycle events directly on hiccup nodes. It doesn't have to be in a component.
Yes.
So that's something that's no longer in Replicant. It does not have components. It has. This is not entirely true, but it almost just has one function, that's render. And you pass it some hiccup, and it renders it as efficiently as it can. And then we have later. I've added, or actually we're experimenting with a feature now, which is something similar to components, but just for the rendering part. But yeah.
And what is it, or how do you call it?
We call it aliases. So it's similar to how reagent components look like. So you can have a vector, and then instead of a keyword in the first position, you can put a namespace keyword. Mm-hmm. And that namespace keyword can then dispatch to a function that will replace the hiccup with something else.
Yes. So, but it's still, it's the cycle. You have a state. The state leads to render DOM, and on elements you have something connected. But you are now more declarative in describing what event is being caused, and that again calls the dispatch. This changes the global state, which mutates the DOM. Yeah.
And the model is still the same. You always pass in all your data, render the entire hiccup tree, and then render it with Replicant.
Yeah.
So, there are many things that Replicant does not have. It does not have proper components. It does not have local state. It cannot do partial renders in a single component like you would do in React. You have to go through the root every time. But I mean, that's the programming model. Inside Replicant, it tries to be smart about things and will abort rendering as soon as possible when there are no more changes.
Yeah.
And in benchmarks, it performs quite well. So
yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, what I saw quite a lot is that people split the state into two parts. One state is basically the data you are showing, the data you need for the business logic, even when it's on front end.
Mm-hmm.
And then the UI state, like for example, whether some menu item, like if it's visible or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And often people want to keep that visual state in the component
Mm-hmm.
and have the, let's say, the state of the data that are being shown and that are needed for the business logic of the application are in the central state. Here, I suppose you will keep both, like visual state and the business data in one atom, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you, but it has to stay outside of Replicant. So very convenient to put it in one atom, but if you want to keep them separate, you can. But
Okay.
but it has to be outside of Replicant because there's no place in Replicant for state. And,
For state.
and of course this is a trade-off, right? Like for some things it's very convenient to have a little bit of local state to toggle a menu open or closed or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think on the flip side, with this global model, then you can always represent your entire UI as one piece of data that goes into Replicant. And that has immense benefits in my experience. So I wanted a tool that forced you to do that.
Yeah.
Because that has a lot of benefits. But I mean, it also has some drawbacks because you have to manage local state at a global level in some way. And you have to figure out how to do that because Replicant does not tell you how to do that. It's really just a rendering library.
You have to design the structure of that atom yourself. So basically,
yeah. Or you could use DataScript or whatever. You can have everything on the server. It's really up to you, but you kind of have to build a little bit of a framework around it to suit your needs. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I was watching some of your presentations and I saw that it is quite productive. Let's speak about it later. But also I found that your presentations look very nice. Are you a visual person? Do you know how to make applications beautiful, or was it just...
Well, thank you for saying that, but no, I don't really have any visual skills. So this is I've been lucky somehow.
lucky, yeah.
Like usually I will use some kind of pre-made template stuff. I'm not sure. I've used Reveal.js for some talks, and I've used Excalidraw, which I like a lot. It gives you this hand-drawn style diagrams, stick figures and stuff like that. I mean, those tools are easy to make things look good because the building blocks they give you look good.
Yeah. I have to work with a designer. Otherwise, I will turn every application ugly.
At work, we definitely work with the designer. Yeah.
I even try. I always buy a template. It's a beautiful template. But then when I just copy classes, it doesn't look good as the demos.
Putting things together is a true skill, right? Even if you have beautiful building blocks, putting them together is a skill. And like I said, I've been working with Frontend for over 20 years, so I think I have a pretty good sense of good usability, or UX, but I am unable to put together a visual design on my own. I'm not a designer.
in this, so there are people who have a talent to learn music instruments and sing well, and there are people who just can't. And maybe there is such a thing for people who do visual design. That
Well,
some people just get it.
I actually believe everyone can do that, but you have to put time towards doing it. And I haven't put in the time to learn design, but I'm sure I could have learned it if I had wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you could have done it too, but I mean, you have to put time into it.
I should have. Being surrounded by nice design is actually a very good thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, like, so my closest colleague that I've also done some screencasts with, Magnar Sven, he did through the past few years put some time into learning InDesign and Photoshop and a couple other things, and he's become a lot better than me at making things look nice. So I mean, it's possible.
It's possible, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Okay, let's get back to ClojureScript. So one thing that's always surprising for me how popular Clojure is in Nordic countries. Why Nordic countries? What's so attractive for people there?
I'm not. I don't know, but and also, is it really that popular? I mean,
Yes.
there are some. Okay, yeah. So
Yes.
there are some projects around here. I could not speak for like Sweden and the other Nordics, but for Norway, I mean, we have a relatively small but active community. And why people would, I don't know. My question is, why isn't it more popular everywhere else?
And that's actually a great question. Why isn't it more popular? Because, like, if you ask me, Clojure is super productive. It's very pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
It's well-designed language, but you have to see it only when you do software development for a while. For me, like being a newbie and understanding why Clojure is done how it is impossible. While when you burn yourself for years and years running into errors, and then you find Clojure and find that all of those errors are impossible in Clojure by design.
Yeah.
It's a question for me. Also, DSLs. When you look at, for example, business applications, most often business applications are really that you describe domain, and then you visualize what's happening in the domain, and you manage who can do what, and that's it. And even description who can do what is basically DSL. And all Lisps are just the best language. Like, it's not because I'm fan. It's objective fact. Nothing can be better than homoiconic languages for DSLs.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And so for business applications, Lisp languages should be the most powerful solution that exists. So it's surprising for me. For a while, I think there are some things lacking. Like Clojure is a world of dev stacks, and very let's say most of Clojure developers are actually proud that they are not using those MVC frameworks.
Yeah.
But it might be actually limiting, because for many applications, you can generate CRUDs and get those 90% there in a day or two. There is no such thing in Clojure.
No.
And
I mean, like, I contribute to this as well, like we just discussed with Replicant. It's just part of the solution. It's not a solution, right? You cannot use it to build a front end. You can use it as part of your toolkit to build, but you have to like have the skills to build the rest. And this obviously means it isn't well suited for less experienced people.
Yeah,
because you have to have some experience to know how to put things together.
Yeah.
So, and I guess this is just part of what you said, that Clojure's kind of attracts people with some experience in the background.
Yeah, and when you have people who work in Laravel, they're not building it PHP. They are building it in Laravel. They are not building it in Ruby. They build it in Rails, not in Java, but in Spring. They are certified in Spring. They are looking for Spring jobs, and companies are not looking for Java developers. They are looking for Spring developers. So there is a whole ecosystem that is not only bound to the language, but to the framework that's featureful and gives you plenty of things out of the box. So,
and here's a thing that I suspect is that even if someone were to make this something like this for Clojure, and I know several people have tried, it's probably not going to happen because you're not going to get the existing Clojure ecosystem to adopt it. Because they're using Clojure to be able to build their own stuff.
Yes.
And I don't think people are eager to jump onto, like, I think there's something called sales or whatever, which is obviously meant as I don't know anything about how to use it. Don't mean to say anything bad about it, but I don't think that the people who are currently using Clojure are looking for something like that. And then it will be hard to sell it to new beginners if no one in the community already is using it. Or it's hard to get traction around it and make it like the one big thing.
Yeah, even in Flexiana, we built Xiana framework, which is it's in between a dev stack and framework, because we basically took existing libraries like Rated, Untaya, Honeyseeker, JDBC next, and so on. So these let's say same defaults, and we wrapped it and gave it a little bit of facade to make it look like MVC framework. But actually you're right, and actually it might be the thing we were speaking in the beginning today, that there are actually functional programmers who want to express problems their way. And not the Spring way or Laravel way.
Yeah, and I mean, like, this has been one of the appeals for me personally, because if I look at the app that we're building at work now, it's like we basically build the framework bits ourselves, right? But that means that we only have to build the bits that we want to use. We don't have to build a full framework because we're the only users. So that allows us several things. Like, first of all, I know everything that goes on. I understand all of it. It's all our code. It only does the things that we need it to do. So there are less indirection, because we can build more specifically towards our goal. And it doesn't change under our feet. Like, there are not other people changing it as we go. So I think these are pretty good benefits for us. And
yes, and you don't need to be certified to know the code base.
No.
And so how's your approach when you design the architecture of the application?
It's, I guess, how can we have as many pure functions as possible, like the driving. I mean, the thing we have now, we designed, were two people who designed the architecture, and it's built around functional core imperative shell, which is basically how many pure functions can you have, right? You want to express all the important operations as pure transformations, and keep the impure machinery parts on the outside. And then we like data, so we try to express things as data as much as possible. And those are I would say the driving motivation, to have things represented as data and to separate pure logic from impure systems. Or we use the word machinery a lot. I like that word to represent the things that just keep running and do a lot of imperative stuff.
Yes. And And again, it seems to me that it will be really expressing the application as a series of transformations.
Yeah,
which is
much.
very, very common in functional programming.
Yeah. And I would say also that Datomic makes this a lot easier than it could have been, because with Datomic, reading data is basically pure. At least it's conceptually pure, because you have a snapshot of the database, and the snapshot of the database is a value. It doesn't change. Yes. And even though if you use, like we use the entity abstraction a lot, and technically it fetches data under the hood if it needs to, but we treat it as if it was pure, which gives us huge leverage, I think. Because if going to the database is a network jump, then this separation becomes much harder to do, because then you have to fetch all the data up front, then go into the functional core, and then come back out. So that's fine, but what if you have decisions where you need to fetch some data, do some logic, fetch more data, do some logic? Yeah. Those kinds of things. How do you express those things when you need to let's say, get some data, calculate something, store some data, get some other data? Yeah. So store some data, we do not do in the middle of a run like that. We like storing stuff we do at the end always. At least where possible. There are some exceptions. I mean, when we log a user in, we might have to store your session. So some logic there that kind of deviates from the norm a little bit, but most of the time, side effects will be carried out as the last thing that happens. Okay. And reading is not a problem, because, like I just said, with Datomic, the database is a value, and so you can read from it in between other decisions without problem. Yes. Yes. Okay, so your one run is always based on one version, on one snapshot, and by the end of the operation, you store all the changes at one. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Either that, or we split it into multiple operations that can run like this. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good. How does your daily workflow looks like? What tools do you use? How? Yeah, I use Emacs. End of story. No, I mean, I use Emacs. We're most of the time we're in the office. We do a lot of pair programming. We're currently 3 developers on my team, and I mean, it varies a little bit from week to week, but we try to do all the important stuff. We try to have at least 2 people working on at the same time. If we're making design decisions or architectural decisions or whatever, we're usually 2 people working on it. Yeah. And when you are, for example, in a task that is more, let's say, front-end oriented, so you have let's say Emacs on one screen, portfolio on the second screen. Also, you should introduce, if people don't know what's portfolio, so I guess portfolio on the second screen, and then you iterate with REPL until you get the UI you like. Or so for UI work, I will typically so let's say I'm building a new feature that has a UI. I will typically start by building any UI components that were missing, if there are any. Like if we need new UI components, I will do that with Portfolio. And Portfolio is a thing that I made that it's basically storybook for ClojureScript. Yeah. But it just runs from a regular ClojureScript REPL. It's easier to set up than Storybook. So when doing that, I will have Storybook running in a browser, and I will have Emacs on the other screen, and I will typically build just the component in isolation until it looks like whatever I need. Yeah. Whenever that's against mocked API, like mocked backend. So Our components are only like, so every component in our system is just a function. So you just pass it some data and it renders something else.
Yeah. So it just state. So it never calls any API. It just gets a state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the goal of this part of the work is just to get the visual thing to look the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So if it has multiple states, we'll mock those up in Portfolio by just hard coding data. Like this is what it looks like when it's deactive, here's active, here's open, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just make the examples you need, and there will always be data driven, where you can just type data in and get the desired results.
Okay.
So, and when that's done, I will know what the data should look like, because I just type the data in to drive the visual design, right?
Yeah.
So the next part then usually is to write a function that will take our domain data and transform it to the data that the components need to get rendered in the correct state.
Yes.
And that I will usually do with tests.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, I would say, one of the benefits of having a dumb component tree like this.
Yeah.
Since it just takes
and
data.
Actually, and what's great that you iterate with the components. It's purely functional, and then you are writing this transformation. Let's say getting this data, and it's in a way also purely functional programming, right?
Yeah, it is entirely purely functional because it's just a mapping. You pass in some domain data and you get out something that is ready to go into a component.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the component submits some data that should be stored, right? So what happens next?
Yeah, if there's user input from the component, or...
Yeah, like imagine a feature is you show a form, so you need to get the data to the form, and this form causes you not only to store the data, so validate and store the data, but it causes some side effect like sending an email or a notification to the phone.
Yeah. So for this, we have like I mentioned earlier, a command system, and the client has all the code it needs to send a command. So I will then just set up an event handler on the data that goes into the component.
Yeah.
Which is some data that tells the system to issue a command, basically.
Yes.
So this is just a piece of data you prepare, and then when you click the button, the command will be sent to the server. So the next step then is to implement the specific command on the server. And again, this is just pure functions, because the command implementation will receive the command data, and it will return a list of side effects. And the side effects will typically be like, store this stuff in a database, put this stuff on a NATS queue, and send this email, or something like that.
Yeah.
And doing those things is already implemented once, and we don't write that again. It's like that's done and hardened and finished. So all the code that I write for this feature is just pure functions.
Pure functions, which is awesome. But what happens, for example, when the mail, when you are supposed to send an email and it fails? How does the information propagate back to frontend? If it does.
Yeah, some of it does. Like all this is not built out yet because we're in the beginning phases, like I mentioned. But we have some like general error management that will pop up like a HUD or something, and we have some places where we do customized error reporting. But usually the result will come back to the client. The client will basically get a receipt for its command, which will tell it whether or not it was okay.
Yeah.
And if it was okay or if it wasn't, then it can query for more information about the error.
Yes.
If it needs to do that. Yeah.
And there might be, in that state, might be a key, let's say, flash messages or errors, important messages. and you can show some model, the email wasn't sent, and so on. No matter, like, it can be independent of the screen because the user wants to know about an error, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, like we haven't implemented email sending yet, but in that case, I would imagine that you would have something to refer to that email at a later stage, probably like an ID or something.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And okay. And so you said that you are using Emacs. Are you using any AI, any Copilot in Emacs or elsewhere?
We have no AI in Emacs. So no, yeah. I would say, like, in general, our Emacs, or I say our because we share it on the team. So every developer on the team uses the same Emacs setup, so that we're optimized for pair programming.
Yeah.
And this setup is quite, like, we have a lot of stuff in there, but visually it's quite minimalistic.
Yes.
We don't have a lot of blinking and pop-ups, and we try
tips and menus and so on.
No, we try to hide as much of that. Like, I think of it as distractions, but we try to keep them off, and we use more active key bindings to, like, if you want to complete something, I will press a key combination instead of having the combination like lit up for me, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah. So it's not like SpaceMax that's showing the tooltips which you can use to navigate.
No.
Which means that everybody needs to know Emacs quite well.
Yeah.
Including the customizations. And so the Emacs config you have in your team, is it customized heavily, or is it close to, let's say, default Emacs installation?
It's customized quite heavily, I'd say. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we typically don't remap basic Emacs stuff. So if you know how to use a basic Emacs setup, you will be able to, like, find files and save stuff and stuff like that.
Around.
Yeah. We don't change too many defaults, I think, but we have added quite a bit of stuff, and we've hidden a lot of UI stuff by default.
What have you added?
Just configuration of modes and stuff, like for Clojure mode, and set up LSP, CIDR. I mean, like, standard stuff you would need to be able to do a good job as a programmer. Yeah. Things that are not default out of the box with Emacs.
Yeah, and when you work with Datomic, you still, like, you do it via REPL in Emacs.
Yeah,
right.
Typically we use the REPL in Emacs, and we have so our news colleague is a huge fan of Clerk, so he's spreading the word of Clerk. So I've started to use it a little bit myself, and we also use Clerk a little bit now for looking at data from Datomic. You can put up tables and graphs quite easily. So
Okay, great. So we are running for a while. Let me lightening up. So I saw that you play board games. Is it true?
It's true.
And what board games do you like?
I like a lot of board games. I think the game that I played the most this last year is probably Through the Ages.
What is it about?
It's like a civilization simulator. Yeah. So you start like in the ancient times.
The Stone Age.
And then go through time. And then you compete with each other to build like the best civilization.
Yes.
Either you can do it by having the most culture, or you could be the strongest military power.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And there's like a balance to be struck between those two things.
Yes. In Civilization, there is also diplomatic victory, which I never did. I always did either science or military victory.
Yeah. So that's fun. I mean, that's very cool. I played a lot of like train games, 18xx games, which are quite. I don't know if you know them, but they're like heavy strategy games where you basically run train companies. So it has basically
so
two.
It's like railroad tycoon.
Kinda. You have that part where you're building, laying track and establishing routes and stuff like that, and then you have this other part which is like a pure economic manipulation, where you can buy shares in the different companies. And you can run a company really badly and dump it on another player and stuff like that.
Cool.
So
have you tried to design your own games?
No, I haven't done that. But my colleague Magnar has. And we played his quite a bit. He made a really good strategy game about running an IT company, which has it has lots of really fun like kicks to our industry.
Yeah. I play plenty of games with my kids. We also do a lot of homebrew D&D campaigns.
Yeah, I've played some D&D as well. Yeah.
And
what games do you play?
So I have I can bring I can go to the shelf. We have like 40 games, but I like D&D. I like Spice Road, which is quick logic game. If you know Spice Road,
I know. Yeah.
We like Dragonbane, which is very simplified. Like people wouldn't say it's simplified D&D because the game is as old as D&D. I think it's from Sweden.
Yeah.
But it's very tactical. Then it's Django. What Django? So basically, the threat level is always going up. You have to flip cards. You're moving on the board, and you have to find crystals before the aliens will kill you. Then we play Danger of Kolula. We have plenty of game books. Actually, I am teaching one of my sons who is interested in programming. I am teaching him Clojure by building a game book. So cool. Like transitions that you are on the page 23 and you can do decision ABC and then 21. So he makes a decision in Clojure, so it reads from the command line and he goes elsewhere. So actually we are building our own game books.
Yeah.
So each, like always when you move somewhere, it's purely functional, but besides reading from the keyboard input. So always mutate the state by, for example, you drink a healing potion, so your health improves, or you fight a creature, so your health might decrease. You find an item, so inventory extended. So actually, we are designing a game or games with one of my sons, and we have like 40 different games. One is how to lay out. It's pictures of cats on the boat. So we have like, it's a big plane and you have different cats and you need to have all like 4 cats of the same color that touch each other. And for that you get points. There are plenty of games we haven't played yet. And we want to train them. But for example, Voidfall is a game it's so difficult to learn. It's so complex. I think it's more difficult than D&D to learn. So,
have you played games? You mentioned D&D. Have you played Gloomhaven?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Gloomhaven is like D&D in board game form. Yeah. So
so we bought figures. We have figures. We draw dungeons. I use Dungeon Alchemist, which is a game. It's an app where you can design dungeons.
Oh, right.
And then create a camera, so you are basically going through the dungeon. And and it's like first person. So you can either look from the top, like if you knew Dungeon Keeper, like isometric view, or you can really become a camera and you can go through the dungeon and it becomes very immersive. I always play some music. Sometimes I use ChatGPT to transform what I say into fantasy language with all those English words I don't know. But for example, for this, we have stopped using AI that much. have learned a couple of phrases to create the atmosphere, but Dungeon Alchemist actually like gives you the like it is like playing a computer game because my kids are small, so they are interested in the fighting part, not
Yeah,
that
yeah,
much the story parts. So
yeah. Oh,
for them, it's go to the dungeon and find a crystal, and in the
yeah.
meantime, they will have to fight different creatures. Over time, when they will get older, and if they will be interested in playing, it will be more about story. So the dungeon itself is not so important anymore. The story will be.
Yeah.
And for that, we have plenty of books at home, and I have my own campaign, World of Goals, which in my head is actually a long story I've created, like the whole mythology that the world that was abundant and rich and everything was beautiful and there were waterfalls and trees is now just the desert full of goals. And the first part is that you have to basically stop all this and give the world the water again, and nature again, and waterfalls. And in the second, actually, floods will come. They don't know. Kids don't know, and they don't watch me on YouTube, so they will not know. So once they will finish, actually, and when the world will get to normal, floods will come, and there will be another set of goals. Everything to the danger. So actually, I'm already thinking of the second campaign. Speaking of which, besides board games, what do you do when you don't work?
I play guitar.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I do that.
Classic guitar or electric guitar or both?
Electric guitar. Yeah, sort of both, but mostly electric guitar. So I have a band that I play with occasionally. Mm-hmm.
So you play concerts and
Yeah, 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 we do.
what's the name of the band?
It's called Execration. It's a death metal band.
Death metal band. Ah, that's great. That's great.
Underground death metal, I would say. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
We play. Yeah.
Lovely.
So I do that quite a bit, and then I have a family, so I keep them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Hang out with
Great.
them. Yeah.
That's perfect. Okay. Two last questions. So, if not Clojure, what language would you use and why?
I'm so boring. I don't know how to answer that. Maybe some other Lisp. I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Other Lisp, yeah. So Scheme most likely, or Common Lisp. Okay.
Scheme or Common Lisp or something. Yeah. I've been so sucked into this Clojure thing for a long time, and I'm so happy with it. I kind of stopped looking at other languages.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I like OCaml syntax, so for me it would be F# most likely.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I'm happy with Clojure, so it's just what if.
Yeah.
Okay. How can people support your work? Mainly the open source work, but
I mean, try it and interact with me or the people who are using it. We have my main effort now is Replicant, and Replicant has a Slack channel on the Clojure Slack. So yeah, drop by and ask questions or try it. Tell me what you think of it.
Right. Okay.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah.
Time well spent. Thanks a lot. And hopefully we will speak together again.
Yeah, sure. I enjoyed it. Yeah.